This is Warrior Kid Podcast number 19, Ask Uncle Jake. This podcast is based on the two Way of the Warrior Kid books. The first one, Wimpy to Warrior, the Navy SEAL Way, and the second one, Mark's Mission. The Way of the Warrior Kid books are about young Mark, who faces a lot of problems that kids everywhere face, but Mark gets help solving these problems from his Uncle Jake, who was a Navy SEAL and who stays with Mark in the summertime. This podcast is for kids to hear some more lessons from Uncle Jake and also to get the chance to ask Uncle Jake some questions. Here's the first question. There's a 10-year-old warrior kid named C, and that warrior kid asks, I play baseball a lot. My team isn't that good, and I get upset when someone makes an error on an easy play. How do I keep myself under control when this happens? Yes, I know this feeling. Sometimes people get mad when someone on their team makes a mistake. But I want you to think about this. If you get mad at someone on your team for making a mistake, and let's say you yell at them, or you tell them that they did a horrible job, what do you think that does to them? Do you think that that gets them motivated to play better? Do you think that the extra pressure you're putting on them from yelling at them, do you think that's going to improve their performance? Well, I'll tell you right now, and I think you know this, it won't. Getting mad at someone on your team will actually make them play worse. They're going to lose focus, and then they're going to make even more mistakes. And another thing that happens when you get mad at someone on your team, it makes the whole team get worse. It separates you as a team. And instead of the team fighting together against the opponents, the whole team will be fighting against each other, fighting against itself. And that will definitely not help you win. So, if someone makes a mistake, stay calm, stay under control, tilt your head back a little bit and take 3 nice big breaths. And then, instead of yelling at your teammates or getting mad at them, give them encouragement. Because that's what you want to do. You want to win. And the way that you're going to be able to win is if the whole team plays better, and the team will play better if they have a good attitude. If they're encouraged, tell them they can do a better job next time. Give them a pat on the back and tell them that you're there to support them. And that will make the whole team do better. The next question is from a 9-year-old warrior kid named Noah. And Alana also had a very similar question, so I'm going to answer them both at the same time. The question is, what is your favorite Brazilian Jiu Jitsu move and submission? So I would say my favorite move is the very simple scissors sweep. It's my favorite way to go from being on the bottom to being on the top. And it's also a pretty simple move to learn, but it even works when you're a black belt, because I'm a black belt and I learned that move when I was a white belt more than 20 years ago. And I still use that move all the time, and I even use that move against other black belts. So that's probably my favorite move. It's just the normal, traditional scissor sweep. And then my favorite submission, I think I have to name 2 of them. Probably the guillotine and the Kimura. The guillotine is a choke, and I do catch a lot of people in it. And I also like the Kimura because I can catch that submission from a lot of different positions. And what I really like about both of those submissions is that they can both be used with gi or without gi. Gi is the uniform that you can sometimes wear in jiu-jitsu, and you can also do jiu-jitsu without a gi, with just a t-shirt on. And what I like about the guillotine and the Kimura is that they're effective either way, and that is why I like them. So there you go. Scissor sweep, and then the guillotine and the Kimura. And that actually leads into the next question, which came from Connie and Marianne. And they ask Uncle Jake, is it better to do gi or no gi in jiu-jitsu? Well, that is a good question that I get asked a lot, even by adults. And the answer is that they are both great. And what's good about, I do them both, and I think you should do them both, and I think everybody should do them both. And if you get good at one, it will help you get good at the other one too. The reason is, it's harder to hold people in position with no gi because there's nothing to hold on to. So you get better at controlling people when you're training with no gi. Your control of other people gets better. But it's much harder to escape when you are using the gi. So if you can escape with the gi on, it means you know what you're doing and you're good at your escapes. So I guess my answer to the question, it's not better to do gi and it's not better to do no gi. They're both really good to learn. And if you can, try training both. And if you go to a school where they only have one or they only have the other, that's fine too. You can get really good at one and then eventually you'll get to go and train at a school where they have both or where you can train the other one. Okay, the next question is from Kyle. And he's a 9-year-old warrior kid, and he wanted to know how he can conquer his fear of the dark. Okay, so you remember how Mark overcame his fear of the water in the first Way the Warrior Kid book? He started off with just a little bit of water, just going into a little bit of the water, just up to his ankles. And then after he was used to that, he went a little bit deeper. And then the next time he actually dunked his head in the water, and Uncle Jake was with him and making sure that he was safe. And then after that, he started to swim, but he swam really close to the shore, so where he could actually touch the bottom if he needed to. And then he swam away from the shore, but Uncle Jake was close by. And then he eventually got to swim on his own, and he reached the goal, which is in the book. And if you haven't read the book, I don't want to spoil it for you. But he eventually reaches his goal and overcomes his fear of the water. Now, what you can do, Kyle, is the same thing. Start going in places that are a little bit dark. Maybe not completely dark, but just a little bit dark. Like, and then you can do this. You can, when you go to bed at night, instead of keeping the lights on, instead of keeping 2 lights on in your bedroom, just keep 1 light on. And then when you're used to that, turn off both the lights in your room, but leave the door open and leave the hall light on so you can still see a little bit. And then after you get used to that and you realize there's nothing to be scared of, shut the door a little bit. Make it just a little bit darker. Still no lights in the room. Leave the hall light on, but shut the door a little bit. And then once you're used to that, shut the door all the way. And now all the light will be in your room will be just a little crack underneath your door from the hallway. And you'll realize that there's nothing to be scared of. And then when you're used to that, you can shut off the light in the hallway. You can go in your room. You can shut off your lights, shut the door, and you'll realize that there's nothing to be afraid of. And that is how you can overcome your fear of the dark. Now, everybody gets afraid of different things at different times in life, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote a new book called Mikey and the Dragons. And this book is about a kid. His name is Mikey, and he's kind of scared of everything. And I'm going to read you the beginning of this book called Mikey and the Dragons. And it says this: there once was a little boy named Mike, and there were many things in the world that he didn't like. He was scared of spiders and beetles and bugs, and always thought they hid under the rugs. They were creepy and crawly and nasty and mean, and he ran from every bug he had ever seen. But it wasn't only insects that gave Mikey a scare. There were many other things for which Mike didn't care. He left the light on when he went to sleep at night. He was scared there were monsters ready to bite. Hidden in his closet or under his bed, he thought they might get him when he lay down his head. He imagined a monster with giant teeth and claws, grabbing his neck with its giant paws. And if it wasn't monsters coming to take him away, it would be slimy snakes slithering his way. Yes, Mikey was scared of evil snakes too. He was horrified of what they could do. They could sneak into the house and hide in his drawer and then bite him to bits. Of that he was sure. There were many other things that gave Mikey a scare, which meant there were many things that he wouldn't dare. So that's how the book starts off. And as you can see, it goes on to explain all the different things that Mikey is scared of. And then eventually, Mikey finds a book. He finds a book underneath his bed. And when he finds the book underneath the bed, he opens it up really quickly to look at it, and he sees some scary pictures in there. Of what? Of dragons. Scary dragons. And he's kind of scared of this book. He doesn't know if he wants to read it. But in the book, he also sees pictures of a kid that kind of looks like he knows what he's doing. He looks kind of brave. And so Mikey decides, okay, you know what? I'm a little bit scared of this book, but I am going to read it anyways. And so he opens up this book. It's called The Dragon Prince. And I'm going to tell you what the beginning of that book says. So in Mikey and the Dragon, there's a book within the book. And here's the book, The Dragon Prince. It says, "There once was a kingdom, long ago and far away, and the kingdom had suffered a horrible day. Their protector and leader, their king, he had died, and when they found out, the whole village cried. When the king was alive, he was a powerful force. Now they took the dead king away by carriage and horse. They knew they would miss him, and that made them sad. But there was something else that made them feel bad. The king had always been so strong and brave and protected the kingdom from the dragon cave. The dragon cave was just over the hill and filled with scary creatures that were ready to kill. Horrible dragons of every single type who thought people in the kingdom were especially ripe. The people thought the dragons had breath of fire and that the dragons stood 20 feet tall or higher. They thought the dragons had sword-stopping scales and powerful, long, razor-sharp tails. But the brave king never let the beasts around. He stood up and fought and held his ground. And as long as the king had been the king, none of the dragons could do a thing. Yes, the king always kept the dragons at bay by going out bravely into the fray. It seemed without fear the king would go fight. He'd beat the dragons and come home at night. But now that the king had died and was gone, there was only one person to fight and carry on. But that person wasn't big or mighty or strong. In fact, he hadn't been alive that long. Now the person who had dragons to chase was just a little boy with a smiling face. Yes, the person that now must stand up and be bold was just the little prince who was only 7 years old. And the people in the village just couldn't be sure that this young boy, the little prince, could endure. How could someone so young and so small stand up to the mighty dragons that were so tall? And the prince himself, he also didn't know if he had the courage it would take to go. Because he was so little and small and young, he didn't know if he could get the job done. How could he make the mean dragons yield when he could barely lift a sword or a shield? But no one else dared to step up and fight, not the kingdom's guards or even the knights. So even though the prince was scared, he still knew that fighting the dragons was something he must do. So he went to the king's bedroom and opened the door and went inside and walked across the floor. He opened an old chest that was tall and wide, where the king had kept all his war gear inside. The shield was big, and the sword was so long, it was no wonder the king had been so strong. But the prince was a boy, not a king like his dad, and to lift up the gear took all the strength the boy had. And that made the prince get even more nervous, and he wondered if he was ready for this service. Fighting dragons was such a scary task. The prince to himself had some questions to ask. How could a little boy ever be a man? How could the little prince ever make a stand? But at the bottom of the chest there was a small note, and it looked like something that the king wrote. So just when the prince thought he was over and done, he picked up the note, and it said, "To my son." And that is what I'll read for you right now. I don't want to ruin the book, because the prince then reads the note from his dad, and he learns what he needs to do to conquer his fears. And Mikey, who's reading the book, learns from that as well. So if you want to hear the full story, and like I said, I don't want to ruin it for you by reading the whole thing right now, then you can ask your parents to get that book for you. It's called Mikey and the Dragons. And that is it for questions. And I wanted to read a quick story that was written by Uncle Jake about when Uncle Jake was a kid and how he learned something in life. So here is a story from Uncle Jake. When I was a little kid, my best friend was named Jeff. We did everything together. He was smart and very funny, and we used to do everything together. We would always go to each other's houses and play all kinds of stuff. We both lived kind of in the woods, and we spent a lot of time out in the woods playing army and pretending that we were soldiers or commandos. And we would reenact battles and set up forts and make little obstacle courses through the woods. We would also play cards, and we'd play board games, and we'd clown around doing all kinds of things. One thing about Jeff is, like I said, he was very funny, and he liked to play practical jokes. So we did a lot of that. We would put tape, clear Scotch tape, over the faucets in the kitchen or in the bathroom, and when someone would turn the faucet on, it would spray everywhere and get them all wet. And my mom didn't like that one too much, but it was funny. One time, we turned everything in his sister's room upside down. The bed, the desk, the chair, everything. We did it very neatly, but it was still upside down. His sister didn't like that one at all, but we thought it was funny. When we were in 4th grade, we sat right next to each other in class. Now we really did everything together. We sat together in lunch and always played during recess. We had all kinds of fun. And sometimes we had a little too much fun. Sometimes we would get in trouble in class for talking too much or laughing too much or clowning around too much. And that wasn't good. But we still did our work and learned what we were supposed to learn. And the teacher actually liked us because even though we caused a little tiny bit of trouble, we still followed most of the rules. But one day, we were talking too loud for too long. And the teacher, whose name was Mr. Longman, he told us to be quiet. But we weren't ready to be quiet yet, and so we kept talking and laughing. And then Mr. Longman got mad. And he raised his voice a little bit. And he said, "Boys, that's enough. Stop talking." Well, that was enough for me. I'd never seen Mr. Longman get that mad, and I didn't like it at all. So I got quiet. But Jeff didn't. He kept talking, and he kept laughing, and Mr. Longman got even louder and madder, and he yelled at Jeff, "Jeff, stop talking now, or you are going to the principal's office." I couldn't believe it. Getting sent to the principal's office meant big trouble. It meant no recess for a week. It meant sitting in the corner of the room alone during class. It meant the principal would call your parents and tell them you were not behaving, and then you had to deal with your parents. So you did not want to get sent to the principal's office. But at that point, to my horror, Jeff burst out laughing at Mr. Longman. I couldn't believe it. Now Mr. Longman's face turned red with anger. "Get to the principal's office now," he yelled. And Jeff got up and walked out the door, still smiling and laughing. And after that, Jeff couldn't go to recess, and he had to stay inside with some of the other kids that got into a lot of trouble. And he made friends with them. And then he started getting in more trouble. And when he came back to class, he had to sit alone. And then when he finally was allowed to sit with other kids again, instead of sitting with me, he chose to sit next to some of his new friends, some of the other troublemakers. And even at lunch, he stopped sitting with me and he started sitting with some of his new friends. And in class, he started to get in trouble more and get sent to the principal's office more. And at first, I was kind of sad because I really liked Jeff. So I told him. I said, hey Jeff, you should sit next to me again and stop getting in trouble so we can go to recess. I don't care, he said back to me. You shouldn't be so scared of getting in trouble. It's not a big deal. He told me. It's kind of a big deal, I told him. Your grades won't be very good. You won't learn as much. Plus, it causes a ruckus for everyone in the class, and it makes it harder for everyone to learn. It's not too nice. Why should I be worried about other kids learning? School is dumb. It doesn't mean anything, and getting in trouble isn't a big deal, he told me again. I didn't really know why he'd said that, or why he thought that. Okay, I said back to him. But I didn't mean it. I knew that causing problems in the class was bad. I knew that getting sent to the principal's office was bad. I knew that having to stay inside during recess was bad. And I knew that hanging around kids that were getting into trouble all the time was bad. So I stopped hanging around with Jeff. It still made me sad sometimes because we used to have so much fun together. But I made some new friends and started having fun with them. And I always watched Jeff from a distance as we got older in 5th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then throughout high school. And I watched as Jeff made other bad choices. And he got into even more trouble. He got into more trouble at school. He even got into trouble with the police. And he started doing worse and worse things and hanging around with worse and worse people. He started smoking and using alcohol and even using drugs. And he started to look dirty all the time. And it was sad to watch. And I would see him in the hallway sometimes at school. And we would smile at each other. And at that moment, it would be like we were little kids again, playing in the woods. And I could see a look in his eyes that he missed those days and that he wanted to go back. And so did I. And sometimes when I saw him in the hallway, we would talk for a few minutes. Because after all, we had been best friends. And when I'd talk to him, it would seem like he wanted to be my best friend again sometimes. It would seem like he wanted to stop hanging around with the kids that were getting in trouble all the time. It seemed like he wanted to get back on the right path. But he didn't do it. He kept his friends. He had surrounded himself with bad people and bad things, and he couldn't break away from them. He trapped himself. And he kept doing worse and worse things and got into more and more trouble. And when we graduated high school, we saw each other one last time. But he didn't look the same anymore. His smile was completely gone now. He looked like he was sad. He looked like he was broken. And he knew that I was going into the Navy. and that I was going to try and be a SEAL. And when I said goodbye to him, we shook hands and he told me good luck, and I could see in his eyes that he wished he was going with me. But he couldn't. He had made too many bad choices along the way, and now he was stuck. And I left. I left for the Navy. And I went through boot camp. And then I went and showed up to the basic SEAL training. And I had been there for about a month or two when I talked to my mom. And my mom told me that she had some bad news. Some very bad news. The news was that Jeff, my old friend, my old best friend who was so funny and so smart, he had died. All the bad things he had done and all the bad choices he made had finally caught up with him. The drugs and the alcohol and the bad decisions had cost him his life. And when we were little, he had been one of the smartest and funniest and nicest kids I had ever known. But he had gone down the wrong path. He had made some very bad choices. And now he was gone. And I was very sad that he was gone. But at least Jeff taught me an important lesson about life. And that is that the choices that you make, the little tiny choices that you make as a person, they add up. They add up. And if you do the wrong things in life and you make the wrong choices, there is a price to pay. So make the right choices, even the little ones, the little things. Do your homework, clean up after yourself, stay out of trouble, hang around with the right friends that do the right things, and stay on the path of doing good and being good. Stay on the path of being a warrior kid, because that is the path that will lead to a good life. And that is what I learned from my friend Jeff. And that is all we have for this Warrior Kid podcast. And if you want to get one of the Warrior Kid books, you can get them from warriorkid.com. And you can also get Mikey and the Dragons. You can get that from Amazon. And if you want a Warrior Kid t-shirt or Jiu Jitsu rash guard, you can get them from Jocko's store. And if you start Jiu Jitsu and you want to get a Jiu Jitsu gi, then you can get it from originmain.com. And I also now have something called Warrior Kid Milk. And what that is, it's like a chocolate milk or a strawberry milk, depending on what flavor you like. And instead of being bad for you, it's actually very good for you. You mix it with milk, it tastes delicious, and it will make you strong. And you can get that from originmain.com. It's called Warrior Kid Molk, M-O-L-K. And that's it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reading the books. And remember what I learned from my friend Jeff. Make good choices. Even the little choices you make are important and they matter, so make the right ones. The choices that keep you on the good path. Now go out there and train hard, study hard, work hard, get after it, and be a warrior kid.